Welcome back to OurTribe, the podcast. I am your host, Tuvia Kopstein. In this episode, we meet Yael Trusch. Yael is the podcast host of Jewish Money Matters, and she has developed multiple courses in addition to the podcast to help Jewish people and anybody understand and to develop a healthy relationship to money that's informed by the wisdom of the Torah. Yael is full of fire and life and insights, and it's a lot of fun to talk to her. You're going to have a lot of fun listening. OurTribe, the podcast, is a project of the Podcast Fellowship, podcastfellowship.org, an international outreach organization that helps Jewish people ages 18 to 32 encounter and connect and understand their Jewish heritage by connecting them with mentors, relating the material that they're learning to mentors, earning a generous stipend. In the meantime, check it out, podcastfellowship.org. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok if you spend time over there, on LinkedIn as well. In the meantime, and without further ado, OurTribe, the podcast with Yael Trusch.
Welcome to OurTribe, the podcast that sits down with Jewish professionals and entrepreneurs to hear their stories, share their advice, and bare their Jewish souls.
Okay, we are thrilled to be here today with Yael Trusch. Did I say your name right?
You did.
Okay, very good. Okay, Yael, how are you today?
Baruch Hashem, thank God. Very well, very pleased to be here. I know we've been planning to have this conversation for a while, so I'm delighted that we finally were able to make it.
I'm also delighted. It's very satisfying to finally make it work out. Yael, where are you located in the world today?
I'm in Houston, Texas. Would you believe?
Okay.
Its own country. Texas is its own country.
It kind of seems that way sometimes.
But I did not grow up here, but I've been here for now almost 15 years. This summer will be 15 years.
15 years. So you moved when you were 1 or 2 years old.
Yes, that's right. Exactly.
Okay,
you're very kind, but I'll take it. Thank you.
Okay. So Yael, tell us your story. Tell us from the beginning how you got to do the podcasting, how you got to do that. I think you have 2 separate podcasts and blogs, and what else you're doing, and tell us your Jewish story. Let us hear it.
Yeah. Well, I did not grow up in the States. Well, technically I did. I grew up in Puerto Rico, which is, fun fact. I was always a very spiritual child. Not very connected in practice to Judaism. When I went off to university at the early age of 17 years old at Tufts University in Boston, I had a lot more Jewish friends, and especially from Latin America. So just that having that feeling of other Latin people, my same culture, but also some of them were more traditional. So I started learning a lot more. And I started doing things like keeping kosher, meaning like I started becoming vegetarian and I wouldn't eat the chicken and the meat and little things like that. So I got a little bit more interested, definitely getting more involved in Hillel. This was before the time that there was a Chabad house at Tufts University.
Wow.
And then when I moved to
Must be a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Yes.
Now you can find Chabad even on the smallest universities.
Yes, that's right. Thank God. Yes. So, and then when I moved to Manhattan for my investment banking job after Tufts, I had a bit of a culture shock in terms of, number one, I was already very interested to living a more spiritual life, but I was immersed in a world of investment banking that was extremely demanding, and almost at the expense of one's personal life and personal space. And it left very little time to even explore, what do I really want with my life? What is the meaning of life and whatever? But what I did notice that was very interesting at that point in my life, I was very young, I was 21 years old. I started getting the feeling that, and I'm not knocking investment banking or investment bankers, God forbid, but I started noticing my environment, and I started noticing that among the people, even my superiors, I said, there is no one really here in this environment that I want to be like when I grow up. And that was very scary to me. That was a very big red flag, because if I'm spending 50, 60 hours a week in this institution, and I don't find that there's anyone here that emulates values that I want to exhibit as an adult, as I'm now in my 20s and thinking about my adult life, then something must be off. At the same time, thank God, New York is a very Jewish city. And even though I didn't have much time for a personal life, slowly but surely, again, most of my friends were Jewish. There were events in the city, things like that. And I started getting a little bit more of a notion, and I'll fast forward the story. I ended up moving to Argentina with the bank that I worked for, which was an incredible opportunity. And that slower pace of living in Latin America actually was something that gave me the time to really think, what do I want with my life beyond having a career and beyond making a livelihood? There has to be more. Even though I was trained to always, get the degree and the job and be assertive and do all the things there, I knew there had to be more. So I decided that I'm moving to Miami. I got myself a job offer in Miami, and I'm leaving investment banking and going for a smaller firm in a little bit of a slower paced environment. Now, none of this was yet directly connected to Judaism, but it is connected, and I'll tell you soon why. So I quit investment banking in Manhattan. I moved to a slower pace in Miami. I had a job. And I, again, with my Latin friends, my South American friends, Latin American friends, Jewish friends, I discovered a set of a class, like a class in somebody's apartment, a Torah class. And again, because Tuesday night after work, you're not in the bank working till 11 o'clock at night. You can go to classes, right? So I discovered at that class that there was meaning, there was depth, and I was hooked from the beginning. I said, I don't know what this is, but whatever it is, I want more of. And what I started discovering is that, especially when it came to the role of women, whereas I'd grown up to be this educated, articulate, assertive, intelligent, accomplished woman, right, in this world, and yet I wasn't finding models of life that also fit that. What I found is that in Judaism, all the women that I started meeting who kept Torah and mitzvot, who observed Judaism, actually emulated that and so much more. There was an elegance, there was a practical wisdom, there was a family unit that was admirable, there was relationships with children that were beautiful, and yet there was a sophistication in the thinking and the depth, and like that, it blew my mind. I said, oh my goodness, this is a Jewish woman. I've been shortchanged my whole life, thinking I had to be this masculine, self, or I had to be immersed in this very,
aggressive,
secular environment where there is this depth in Torah, and women are just, if not as wise and accomplished, and everything that, combined that Latin sensitivity of being very feminine, at the same time as this other, part of my life that was, valued smarts and wisdom and, advancement and all that. Everything was combined in this beautiful tradition that was already for me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and it really gave me the permission to continue looking forward. And I'll tell you a pivotal moment in that time that really gave me the green light. And that was a conversation that I had with my mother. I was already 23, 24 years old, living in Miami. And I remember telling my mother, I said, Mommy, I want more for my life. I want to get married and have children. And she said to me, my mother is a very accomplished attorney. She's retired now, but she was always an attorney, an excellent attorney in Puerto Rico. And she said, I'm so proud of you, because if I had to do it all over again, I would do it differently. Now, that's not to say that she wouldn't be an attorney, but there was something about my choice of priorities that the fact that she was even able to admit that, for me, my mother is not a very mushy-feely, emotional type of, it was just like, so, wow, my mother saying that, and it totally gave me the green light to say, you know what, Yael, whatever you're finding here, it's worth exploring. Obviously, there is some value. And so I became very clear in my life that I wanted a family, that I wanted a recipe that had a higher guarantee of success in that area. And I knew it was in Judaism because I was seeing it, right? So I envisioned my life, with Friday night kiddush and, celebrating the Sabbath and all these things. And so slowly I became more observant, and I, went full on kosher, which, like I told you all the way before in college, I was already attracted to. Even Shabbos, I had some friends who were Shomer Shabbat, who kept Shabbat. So I understood. So then I started observing Shabbat. And then what happened is during that process, I had already applied for grad school to do an MBA. Now I had become observant and I was really committed. And I got really scared because I got accepted to a business school master's in business administration at NYU. So I would go back to Manhattan and I had a full scholarship. But in my head, I was like, how am I going to square these two things out? Like, I don't want to leave my rabbi and my rebbitzin, and like, I know this is the right path for me. I don't know, going back to the world of business, it was like, in my head was like, I don't know if these two can jive together in this way. And when my rabbi and my rebbitzin sat me down, I told them, I don't want to go. I don't think I want to go. They sat me down. I said, no, you are going. This is not a choice. Hashem needs you. You have the opportunity, and wherever you are, you can do this, and you're meant to do this. And again, I just thank them for that, because it's a primary, it's Judaism at its best. We are supposed to be in the world. This is not about being reclusive. This is actually about going, getting your degree, because if that's what you're meant to do, it does not say that that's for everybody, but whatever it is you're supposed to do, and illuminating that space and still living like a proud Jewish person who can carry on with their values. So that's what happened. So I went back to business school. And of course, that had its own challenges on its own, because it's not easy to be immersed in that secular environment and still, checking out Friday at 4:00, and then there's also Jewish holidays in the middle of the week and all these things, right? But thank God, I graduated, I finished, and I remember a very interesting point, a very interesting anecdote. When I graduated, one of my really good friends, we'd been in a lot of different group projects together throughout business school. She's not Jewish girl from Peru. We're standing in line together for graduation. She says, "You know what, Yael, I got to tell you something. When I first met you that first year of business school, I said, this girl's not surviving here. There's no way she's going to do this." She says, "I have never seen anything like you." And again, this is not about me. It's just about the fact that in her mind, like, she had never seen the commitment of a Jew and the way that a Jew can still do exactly what she did, and be committed to their values, which are completely, in many ways, counterculture. They go against, what they do. So it was a very cute, very nice moment for me. And then after that, really soon after that, I actually worked for AIPAC for a little bit. And then I met my husband and I got married, and we moved to Eretz Israel. We moved to Israel for a year. And then we actually ended up moving to Shanghai for my husband's work. And then we moved to Houston. So that's how I ended up here, because now full circle to where we started. The reason we ended up moving back here is because my husband actually grew up here. Oh. So I already had 2 children. My in-laws were here. There was a very nice community. There was a school with the right Torah values that we wanted, the right education for our children, and a beautiful community. And so it made really a lot of sense to raise our kids here. And we're very happy that we did. And then I can continue with all the different business adventures that have happened since, but that's how we ended up here.
I have a ton of questions already, so sure. I want to know what happens next. But can you tell me a little bit about what it was to grow up Jewish in Puerto Rico? Was it a Jewish upbringing at all?
No, very traditional, but it was not, the very like, my family was very secular. I was always very spiritual. I'll tell you something really funny. The joke in the family was, a Latin person can understand this joke. It's not a nice joke. It's like, oh, she's going to be the nun in the family, because in Latin America, you think of religion as it's a very Christian country. It's a very Catholic country. So if you want to make a joke about like somebody being, oh, you're going to be the nun, and for a Jewish girl, that's like, okay, right? Because I really was always very spiritual, but I didn't know I wasn't exposed to the infrastructure to do it. There was no Jewish school. I don't think even today we have there was the American school, which my parents decided not to send me to. If you went to the American school, there were more Jewish kids there. My parents didn't send me to the American school. They sent me to another school. So I grew up in a very Catholic environment. Other communities like Panama, like Bogota, other places have much stronger communities. So when I went to college, I got exposed to people who came from a little bit more of a stronger background, and yet we had the cultural similarity. So that really helped me.
You naturally gravitated in college toward Latin American I mean,
Yeah,
Latin speaking, Spanish speaking.
right,
Okay, got it.
right.
Okay, and now tell me about investment banking because I really know nothing, and all I know is that it's extremely demanding, as you're describing, 50, 60 hour works week,
Yep.
hour. What are you guys doing the whole time?
Crunching numbers and not even crunching numbers and proofreading decks and decks of PowerPoint presentations and also like exchanging documents with lawyers so the wee hours of the morning and making sure that like T's are crossed. And it's pretty, I don't want to knock it down. It's a career path for certain people. It definitely wasn't for me. And I'm sure there are people in the industry who have a very strong, values and all that. But there, by and large, it definitely is an environment that is driven by money. And everything is about that promotion. And, I even remember like I worked on a deal that was with a client in Brazil. Okay. And we were financing it from Manhattan. So the client, I worked in Latin America department. So the clients were locally in different countries in Latin America, but the execution of the deal was the origination happened from Manhattan, meaning we got the financing, whether it be different types of loans or whether it needed to also involve, other types of more sophisticated things. So whatever it was, I was in Manhattan and I had a client in Brazil. I was working in a big transaction and I was supposed to go with my vice president to Brazil to meet with the client at a point there. And at some point, my vice president comes and apologizes, which was kind of nice of him, actually, because they chose somebody else who hadn't ever worked on the deal, but happened to be that he spoke Portuguese, which my Portuguese was like, eh. But that wasn't, he said, I'm sorry, we chose him. You're not going. Some people said he's a guy. That's why they chose. I don't care. It was always this feeling of like, somebody's going to take your thing. And even my boss was always on edge that somebody took his promotion. And like, it was just like, what is this? And it's so antithetical to the way we think as Jews, like in everything that I teach, I always tell people like, nobody can touch what's yours. There's no competition. There really isn't. Your only competition is with yourself. Am I living to the potential that I have with my creator? Because he's endowing you with all these gifts and opportunities every single day. So you just have to worry about, am I fulfilling my potential? Nobody can touch your money. No, but you can't affect somebody else's money. Therefore, you're free to share your resources, your contacts, your knowledge, your know-how. You don't have to be scared, right? And all these things. I remember in business school, in investment banking also, there wasn't this feeling, but also even in business school, this idea of starting businesses from a place of serving the world, right? What does the world need from me? Which, as Jews, we understand like whatever talents I have is to improve this world, right? And yes, of course, it's going to drive to money, and money is very important. And it's a topic of my podcast, right? And I make a living out of teaching people how to relate to money in a healthy, Jewish way. Money is very important, but it's not our driving principle. And so this world of Wall Street that I was very much a part of, both, in the industry and investment banking, as well as in the MBA program, it really doesn't exemplify much of that. Now, it could be that business school programs today maybe teach a little bit more, to have a service mentality or a more human connection, a human element to doing business. I'm not sure. I'm curious to find out. But for the most part, at least those days, it wasn't.
Okay. You said also that while you were investment banking, you came to the realization that there was nobody in your field that you could look up to as somebody you want to emulate in your life. How did you know that? I mean, did you have somebody before that was a role model, or you just felt like it's just not here? I don't know anything better, but it's just not here.
I think just God sent me a ray of wisdom and understanding. I don't know. I mean, other than knowing my parents, which are, they're wonderful, beautiful people. I don't know that I knew somebody that I could call my role model at that point, but I just knew there was something here. It was an empty life. I remember seeing first of all, the men around me. There were many things I didn't like, but even the women around me who were older than me, who were, supposedly what I was working towards, right? I was going to become one of them, supposedly. I just remember dysfunctional families. I remember Why? I understand I'm 21 and single. I understand that it's 11 o'clock at night and I've been here every night for 4 days till 11, but why does she have a 5-year-old child at home and a husband and she's still here? Right? Those things just gave me cues that there's something really off and that this is not, if this is where I'm headed, I probably should start rethinking things.
Something deep inside that was telling you this is not the right place.
What? And it's the voice of the soul. It's the voice of the soul. And we all have it. It's always trying to speak to us. And, we kind of push it. But at some point, it's going to say something, whether it be in a Yom Kippur service, whether it be, God forbid, a life-threatening event. The voice of the soul is always trying to talk to us. So I do remember vividly having that moment, as well as that candid conversation later on with my mother, and all these little times where something deeper was telling me, you got to look elsewhere. There's more.
Got it. Now, what was the push when you were already in Miami and you already had found spiritual mentors with your rabbi and rebbitzin? Why did they push you back to business school? Why couldn't you stay in the field of, I imagine it was the field of finance that you had moved to? It wasn't investment banking, but it was something in the same.
It was.
Right? Why? It sounds like that was a place to grow. And so what was pushing you to go to business school? So
that's an excellent question. So part of the reason I had applied to business school is because at that point, the Latin American economy had tanked. And I knew that my days in that company, who was also doing business with Latin America, were numbered. In fact, they had a few layoffs and I hadn't been one of them, thankfully. But I just knew that it was either changing jobs at some point or changing, or doing something else. And I was attracted to business school. I've always been attracted to business. I didn't have a lot of clarity what I wanted to do with my life, which is probably not a good reason to go to business school, but I definitely had a knack for business. I did like it. So I thought, I was 23. I thought, okay, so this is the time. When else am I going to apply to grad school? If I don't know that I need, so I applied. And I applied to get a scholarship and I got the full scholarship. Throughout that time, when I got the scholarship and now it was like time to decide, then it was when they said, no, you've been given the opportunity. And you wanted to do this. There's no reason, like Judaism should not be the reason why you're not going to do it. Right. And if that was my main reason, then that's not a reason. You need to go there and be Jewish and you can continue to become stronger. And in fact, it's very interesting because I always tell my children, whenever you're in a position to be a mashpia, somebody who gives over of themselves, right, who can influence, you actually become more stronger than when you're just a recipient. Right. In life, it's good. We have to receive, we have to have mentors, we have to take time to learn. And I do weekly and all that. But you also have to know what that is for. It's not just for yourself. You're not here to just receive. You're here to give. So in some ways, putting me in that role where I had to, everything that I had gained in those couple of years in Miami, I had to take with me to business school. And I also had to have the courage to carve out space to continue growing at the same time, which they knew that I had it in me, and it worked. I did continue to grow and learn.
I understand much better now. Okay. So now tell us, you got married, you moved to Israel, you lived, and I imagine your husband was learning at that time.
Yeah, my husband was learning at Mayanot Yeshiva. So we had a year-long, beautiful, time in Israel. My son was born there. And then when it was time to, go back to the real world, which was that was a real gift to our marriage, starting off, fresh on our own, really solidifying the relationship. That was beautiful. So my husband had become observant in Shanghai, China, and we actually moved to Miami at first for 2 months, and he had a job offer in Miami. And for me, I'm a Latin girl. I'm like, Miami all the way. We're staying in Miami, but God had other plans. And at the same time, he got a job offer in Shanghai, through a connection that came from the same rabbi who introduced us, which was really beautiful. Like all the signs were there. It was right in the city where his rabbi and rebbitzin were. And it just, I knew, like he asked me, what should we do? I said, well, it's obvious that even though China was never in my plans, And it wasn't really in his. Like when we started dating, he had told me I'm done with China. Like, and of course I was foolish enough to believe him.
You didn't know and he didn't know.
Right. But I was the one who said it's very clear that we have to go there. And it was a beautiful 4 years. It was amazing.
4 years. Wow.
Yeah. It was an amazing time to be part of the community and to contribute. And it was, and we're still very, very close to that community. And we feel very much like it really shaped our family in a very beautiful way.
Okay, I want to get back to that, but I want to make sure we have enough time. Tell me, once you're in Houston, I know at some point you're starting a podcast, the Jewish Latin Princess, right? And it's a podcast and it's a blog. And then at some point there's also a podcast called Jewish Money Matters. And
that is the podcast today.
That's today's podcast. Okay, that's the current one. And you're also doing some coaching, or what is your professional, let's talk
So
about how you got
what
there
happened.
and what are you doing?
We came here and I started, I had made a business plan with my husband when we lived in Israel. Eventually, when we came here, it was after the recession of 2008, 2009. We came here and we decided to revisit that business plan and to start this company. So I helped my husband start a company in America at the same time as things transitioned in the company and I was raising my children. I moved away from that company. He had a team of investors. He had a team of people. I didn't need to be hands-on in that business. And I needed a creative outlet. And I was also teaching Torah classes in Spanish to Jewish women here. When I came here, one of the rabbis asked me to please help him develop the women in the community that you always targeted the Spanish speaking community in Houston, amongst other people. And my kids were very little and I was like, no, until finally they pushed me and they said, you have to do this. And I said, yes. So as I was teaching these classes, I felt like, you know what, how can I take everything that we learn in class and put it in a space that could reach more people, that more people could be helped beyond the 10, 15 women that meet with me on a Sunday afternoon. And it was the days of blogging. So I said, well, I'll just start a blog and I'll make it. I'm a very ambitious person. So I'll make it into a bilingual blog. So then I had to write in Spanish and in English and the whole thing. Now, a little bit fast forward a couple of years, I started listening to podcasts. This is before podcasts were even a thing in the Jewish world. Okay. We're talking 2016.
Yeah.
So in 2016, I said, wait a minute, I really love this medium. I could have a podcast. Now, nobody in the Jewish world knew what a podcast was. And I sat on this idea and I started the podcast and it was, the same name as my blog back then, Jewish Latin Princess. And what happened was how that evolved is the more I was out there speaking and writing articles for the different Jewish outlets and speaking in different communities around the world. And thanks to my husband who helped me because obviously, you have to travel, you leave the kids and, like my husband, he takes a big credit on all this. Okay. And these things don't happen on your own. It takes a village. But as I'm doing all this, having all this exposure to Jewish women all over, I found, Rabbi, that there were 4 big pain points, mostly that women were struggling with. And those were, number 1, relationship with, their marriage, right? So marriage with their spouse, their relationship with their children, so parenting, their relationship with body image, self, food, that kind, and the relationship with money. Now, marriage, Baruch, thank God I have a really good marriage. Maybe I could talk about it. I don't know if I could talk about it 24/7. Children, okay, I think I'm a pretty good mother. I don't know if I want to talk about parenting, every day. Food and body image, I know nothing about. Money, that's interesting, I said to myself. People are really struggling with this, and I have a lot of experience in this, not just from my personal, academic and professional background, but also from personal experience, and I'll get to it in a minute. Why I was noticing this is because, again, we go back to that point that I said before. I'm always looking for what is the best way that we can serve, right? So I started feeling like if I'm talking about everything, I'm actually not helping that many people because I can't go deep enough. Right. So I kept getting stuck in like, I can talk about many things and Judaism addresses every area of life, but do I want to be a generalist or do I want to really take a pain point in a person's life and be able to really take them and hold their hand and help them? And that's why I started asking, what are the pain points? What are women really struggling with? And so that's how I came to that conclusion. Now, when I observed those 4 pain points, I said, 1 minute. money. Okay, I have a professional background in this, so I understand a lot about this. But not only that, Judaism actually informed a lot of my current relationship with money, because what happened was when we were living in Asia, as I told you, we lived through the recession of 2008 at that time. Now, when I got married and I lived in China right after, in Israel and then in China, yes, I came with a professional background in money and finance, but on a personal level, I wasn't really an apt, manager of my own money. Like, I really wasn't. And you'll find this with many professionals, okay? And now I say it with no shame. That's part of the irony here, right? And I never had to think about the fact that I didn't have proper money management skills until there was that time where my husband felt a tremendous amount of financial pressure, and we had to ask ourselves a bunch of questions about, where this is going. And I started feeling the tension in our marriage, which in many marriages, if it's not addressed properly, could turn, sour in many ways, right? And where I found answers to solve all of that financial quandary and pressure that was affecting not just the bank accounts, but also the marriage, was in Judaism. I realized the personal finance stuff, that's the easy part. But the mindset part, and the mindset as it's shaped by Judaism, that was really what turned the wheel. To give you a few examples, okay? Most of the world out there in personal finance will tell you, there's 4 ways to allocate your money. You save, you invest, you spend, and then you give. If you're a generous person, you give, right? And I can't tell you that we weren't givers. We probably maybe were generous givers. But if it's a recession, then maybe we need to tone it down a little bit. Maybe we can't really be giving right now, right? That's the way the world thinks. But we Jews don't think like that. There is a mitzvah to give maaser, to give 10% of our after-tax earnings. This is no matter what. Obviously, there's exceptions, but in general, okay? And it's a whole complete paradigm. We give first, right? And that's just to give you one example, the idea of giving, the idea of what is the foundation of my business and financial life? Oh, it's exclusive trust in God. Excuse me, who do I think is giving me this business? Who do I think is giving me this challenge? Who do I think actually sent the money to the bank account? It wasn't my client. It wasn't my savvy. It wasn't my investment banking. It wasn't my NYU degree. There's God above. Right. And I have to completely rely on him, that everything that's coming is from him. Even with the idea of, what are my Jewish values? Like, what are our values? We talk about this when we're dating, but really, is this a conversation that is ongoing, and that actually is the way we spend our money aligned with those values? Because if we're really honest, very often what we find, if we really become honest with ourselves, is that we might be spending money or allocating our money. I'm not just talking about the giving side. I'm just talking in general about expenditures, just because somebody else does it like that, because my parents did it like that, or my sister-in-law, or my neighbor. Sure. No. What are the Jewish values of this family? What is of the essence when push comes to shove? And am I able to put my money where my values are? Those are very, very important things that I think it's just a Jewish reframe. It's just a Jewish way of managing money, and the way it impacts the conversation and the decision making in a marriage. And so for me, it was very clear at that point that nobody was talking about this. Nobody was teaching women these ideas, how to relate to money in this way, and how to relate to their husbands, to have these values-based conversations with each other, so that you can make peace and you can make peaceful decisions together, joint, with no guilt, with no shame. There was so much here that I started talking about it. And what's very interesting is, the more I talked about it, the more the world was like, give me more, tell me more, tell me more. There was like this thirst. And I also found that a lot of...
This was through the Jewish Latin princess?
Exactly. Through speaking engagements, through writing articles here and there, even talking in the podcast a little bit here. I was like testing the waters,
Yeah.
Because it was kind of scary. I'm not going to deny it. Like, here's an Orthodox woman talking about money. Like, it's never done. Like, it's not done. But there was such a thirst, and there was such a need. And I saw so many Jewish women and couple going to non-Jewish retreats and seminars from these very Christian, finance and personal finance gurus. And it might have its merit, but like, we have it. Like, you don't have to look elsewhere. We have it right here. Let me show you where it is. And so, when people started realizing, they're like, well, yeah, show me, like, tell me more. So eventually what happened is I started when COVID hit, I said, this is it. Enough just talking here and there, enough just dropping an article here and there. I probably should teach an online course, because we were all anyway sitting online, and I already had an active newsletter, and I had a podcast, I had an audience. So I put together this course, and people signed up right away. And after, it was a 4-week course, and in week number 3, my students were like, are we really ending next week? Because we want more. I'm like, you want more? Yeah, don't you have more for us? I'm like, I have a ton for you. If you want, we'll continue. And then, that first course developed into other courses and iterations and programs. It just, I kept perfecting it and, hearing the audience and tweaking until it became, like my signature online course. At the same time, I realized, look, if I'm doing all these online programs, on personal finance and Judaism, the brand kind of needs to follow the podcast. I should be educating people also through the podcast. There should be, a cohesive brand. And so I did ask the audience. I told them what was coming, and they voted on the name and all the things. I got them involved, and that's how we transitioned into Jewish Money Matters. And I may have maybe lost some people in the audience, but that's still sometimes the price. I also gained, a lot of people who really needed help. So that's how we got here.
Wow. Okay. So does the business model is that the podcast is driving people to your online course, and that's how you can make a little bit of a living off of this?
So the podcast drives people to the courses. Again, people subscribe to my newsletter. I also have often a lot of, free material that people, besides from the podcast, they can also read to. And then there are people who are going to want more, right? And then I have more available that they can, do online coaching with me inside this one program that I have, God Wants You to Be Rich. I also do a business program with Jewish workshops called From Purpose to Profit. I also had a business mastermind with Joyce Astria, entrepreneur Joyce Astria, that we ran last year. So, I've developed a few programs. And thank God, the audience has been very receptive, and it's been able to touch the lives of many people.
Wow. Okay. Amazing. So tell me the format of the podcast. Would you say the podcast is what you're spending your most time on, or is it the development of the courses, or is it really equal?
The podcast is where I spend, because I air an interview on Mondays, and I air an Ask Yael Friday episode on Fridays. So it's 2 episodes a week that I have to prepare for. So it definitely does take a lot of time. Whenever I'm running my live course, that sort of takes over my life. We just finished it. Now, that one course, it's called God Wants You to Be Rich. That course.
God Wants You to Be Rich? Okay.
Yes. God Wants You to Be Rich.
That's good
it's a great name, and it's a great course. And we just finished it, and it's like amazing. The feedback has been, thank God. Like, I always tell the students, I can't take credit. Like, I'm literally giving you the tools that God gave us. Like, this is, you know what I mean? But because it's a live program, it's very demanding. Now, also, there's a lot of demand for me to do this in a way that is more self-paced, and that they could do, and that would also come at a more affordable price, because it doesn't demand me being with them. So we're developing that. I did develop it once for Jewish workshops, and it was a big hit. So I'm trying to now see if I could develop it and launch it on my own, and it'll free more time so that I can do the podcast, which I love to do, and do the writing, which, again, the podcast and the writing is really where I would love to devote most of my time, but I don't want to not be able to serve, and meaning in the depth that some people need. And some people need a lot more than just reading an article, or just reading, or just listening to an interview a week. You know what I'm saying? So I want to make sure that ability that you can sign up for something and really learn it in depth and go through the implementation process is there. And there's also something very interesting. It's that when people invest in something, they are saying yes to themselves automatically, and they will follow through. You know how many times I've given things for free and people don't even open the modules, they don't open the courses, right? And and the minute they have to pay, it's again, and so it's like there's an incentive, because you're actually changing their lives. So if you actually, I always tell my business students, if you actually want to change somebody's life, you have to charge them. This is not even about you. It's you're doing them a favor by charging them, because until I open my wallet, I am not invested in the learning, and I'm not going to do the learning to the degree that they have to. So yeah.
Wow. Okay. Now, in the podcast, what kind of guests are you looking for, and what's your criteria in selecting a guest? Because it seems like a very broad range, from rabbis to fundraisers to, I don't know, lots of different.
So that's an excellent question. So the criteria is like this: there has to be something that they're doing or they've done that really adds value in terms of a person's understanding of either their financial management or their financial mindset or their business growth, right? So anything that has to do with, like, if I have a guest who has a story, whether it be like I have a guest coming up who, unfortunately did something wrong with insider trading, right? But they're very open about it, and they want to help other people know not to fall in this trap. So that's a story for me. There's a lesson there, right? Or somebody was in the show recently who's written a book about failure, right? So how do we reframe failure? And this person is Jewish and understands from a Jewish perspective. What does that mean for us, right? So we can have these conversations that are going to shape the way a person understands making a livelihood. And I'm very intentional the way I say that. I don't say making a living, because making money is not our life. It's a livelihood. Yes, it's important, but it's not our life. Like you said, we have rabbis like Rabbi Manis Friedman was on the show last week, and we went really deep into marriage and money because he's an expert in marriage. And we also went deep into, other areas of, when our efforts are not yielding the amount that I think I need, do I change the conduit, the vessel that I'm, wherever I'm putting my efforts? Do I stay? Like, all these really, really big questions that people might be struggling with. So those are kind of criteria. Like, is this going to be a conversation that is going to help somebody in their mindset or even in their practical management skills? So sometimes we have more technical episodes, and a lot of the Friday episodes, I'll tell you, people ask more technical questions. So I'll answer questions about different types of bank accounts, or they'll ask about investing or retirement, and people love those too. So it strikes a really nice balance.
The Jewish Latin princess was specifically for women. Is Jewish Money Matters also specifically for women?
So it's interesting you ask, because my forte has always been women. Like, it always has. I mean, I guess because I'm a woman, right? And I have a feminine way of speaking and communicating things. I actually went to do a speech at Columbia University with my husband.
The hands are very much part of it. The hands.
Yes, hands are very much part of it. And I'm Latin,
I don't
so
know if it's
therefore the
Latin.
hands.
Yeah,
It's like you can't escape it. And my husband
I should
got
do that
invited.
more, by the way, in my podcast.
I'll tell you a funny story. My husband got invited to talk at Columbia University at the Spirituality Mind Body Institute master's program about exclusive trust in God. So when he found out that 90% of the students enrolled in this master's program were women, he told Dr. Lissa Miller, who's the founder of this program, he said, Dr. Miller, my wife is also an expert at this topic, and she's an excellent speaker. Why don't I bring her with, and we do the presentation together? And she loved the idea. And afterwards he said, I'm so happy you came, because the questions from the audience were very feminine questions, and there's a feminine way to answer such questions. So it was very nice. So that, to your point, so it, interestingly enough, after I became Jewish Money Matters, and particularly probably after I became more active on LinkedIn, I did start noticing that a lot of my audience are also men. And the reason I know is because it's anecdotal. It's because they write in and they send, comments or questions or whatever. And, they are male names. So that's how I know. And that's okay. That's okay. My courses, the live ones, especially, for example, I teach this is for free every Thursday. I have a class on trust in God and bitachon every Thursday night. That is for women. Only women can register for that class. That's a live class. My God Wants You to Be Rich program, which is a live program. And again, it's exclusive for women. Now I have pre-recorded courses like The Art of Jewish Giving, like Recession Proof Your Life. They're smaller courses. They're pre-recorded. They're, if you're fine with, like, there's nothing there that a man cannot apply. But definitely, I think my sweet spot has always been speaking to women.
Okay. Nothing wrong with that. It's very good. You got to know your strengths.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about, let me ask you, in the course of doing either the Jewish Latin Princess or the Jewish Money Matters podcast, what do you think is the biggest surprise that you heard from your guests that really changed, that really may have turned your thinking around?
That's a really, really good question. One anecdote comes to mind, but before I tell you that anecdote, I just want to clarify for you and for the audience also how these two things tie together, okay? Because we spoke about the management and the mindset. Jewish Latin Princess, everything about it was always practical and profound at the same time. There was deep spirituality, but I'm a very practical person. I'm a very spiritual person, and I go very deep, but I'm also very, very practical. And I think the stamp between the thread between both shows and everything I produce out there is that it is both deep, it's profound, and it's also very practical, which makes it very different from any money show that might be out there. So I think that's also like, for me, it was a natural transition. It wasn't like I'm a different person, and it's a distinguishing part of my personal brand. Now, things that surprised me over the years, interviewing hundreds of people. I mean, I've been doing this for over 7 years. It's always when a person, and it's probably because I admire that so much and I try so much to be like that. It's always when a person has a presence of God, like it's very conscious, like God it's present. I'll give you an example. I interviewed years ago Shirley Varnaghi. In the United States, it's not a name, okay? But Shirley Varnaghi happens to be one of the top journalists in Venezuela and also very, very well known throughout Latin America. And in that conversation, when I interviewed Shirley, and she's like a movie star, okay? Very beloved by Latin American people, a very professional lady, but like a movie star. And I'm saying like the physical, but she happens to be very, very bright and very, very professional. Anyway, so I asked Shirley's telling me, Yael, when I go and she hosts a radio show every morning amongst many other things that she does. She says, when I go live in front of the Venezuelan people every single morning, I say Shema Israel every time. I said, Shirley, why do you say Shema Israel? Like, why? Why before you go on air? She says, Yael, because I learned that the mouth is the most powerful muscle. The tongue is the most powerful muscle. And every day I say Shema Israel, and I ask Hashem, that I ask God that he should put the right words in my mouth. And it's things like that for me, they move me so deeply, because here's a person who's so immersed in secular culture and in the glamour of stardom. And before she opens and goes in front of the people, that's her consciousness, God. Or I had a conversation with Jamie Geller, same idea. You know what I have on my desk every single day, even though I have this massive, empire? It's a Tehillim. A book of Psalms, and throughout my day, I'll open my book of Psalms, right? And I'll have these conversations with people that are so in the world, in God's world, and yet the mission is so present. And the mission is not a self-serving mission, but it's how am I doing this to serve Hashem? And I remember Jamie said, when I have to send that important email, that important pitch, that important proposal, I first say a chapter of Tehillim. I first say a chapter of Psalms to reframe me that this is not about the client. This is not about the person responding to the email. This is about God first. Whatever it's going to be is in God's hand. I'm just here being a messenger, a conduit, and that impresses me. You asked surprise me. I don't know if things have surprised me, but impress me. Those things impress me, because that's the way that I try to live my life.
When you're developing your courses, you're taking information from Torah teachings and you're applying them, that's a big part of what you're doing.
Right.
And so do you run what your lesson plan, I guess, by a rabbi, a mentor, to check it out first? Does he give suggestions, he or she? What's the process like?
That's an excellent question. So over the years, what I've tried to do is anytime, for example, things that are halachic, that are like related to Meiser, for example, to giving, to tithes, things like that, I obviously
Quite
ask the
complicated
question. They're
sometimes. Yeah.
complicated, and I ask the
Mhm.
question to a Rav. And I always tell people, by the way, even in my giving course, right, the art of Jewish giving, I'm teaching you these things, but I'm telling you right now that one of the most important things you need to take out of this course is you need to have a relationship with a halakhic authority. This is not something that we go out on our own. So my students always know this. We are learning for education. And when I'm teaching you these things, when I'm teaching you how to navigate your relationship with money, with your husband, and those conversations, I'm giving you suggestions because I'm teaching you that the Torah values peace above everything else, and peace at home between husband and wife above everything else, right? But I am not your rabbi, right? So, this has been read by my mentors. This has been, a lot of the halacha that I do teach, but again, I'm not there to teach halacha. I'm more there to give you concepts and how you use them in your relationship with money. I'll give you a few examples in a second. But you also have to have a mentor, and you have to have a Rav. So it's very important, because again, that is a tenet of Judaism. Like otherwise I would be leaving it behind. That is a principal tenet of Judaism. But and very often I'll also quote things like, like if my, ideas from marriage and money or whatever that my different rabbis have said on the show, I'll share them with my students. So yeah.
Wow. And in developing the course in the first place, that must have been, I imagine if you're starting money, Torah's insights into money and how to relate to it, that must have been at the foundation. That must have been a brainstorming session with a rabbi,
Yes.
or
Well,
I don't
I'll tell
know.
you what, no, it wasn't a brainstorming session. It was my personal experience. It really started with those three core principles. So though, during that time when I was just dipping my toes and speaking about this, the momentum, the Jewish, what's it called? It used to be JW, Laura Palatnik's momentum trips to Eretz Israel, to Israel.
Yeah.
They have a huge organization, right? So I used to be, I'm part of their speakers bureau. And many, many years ago in 2020, 2021, they started formalizing this speakers bureau, and they invited us who were part of it. We had to do a certain, degree of work and then go to Baltimore to present a TED Talk style talk. It was 18 minutes. It had to be on our topic of our choice, Jewish. And my husband sat me down. I went to look into my old files because remember, I've been speaking already for years. And my husband challenged me and said, Yael, you can pick any topic. You can pick any old thing that you've done, but you've been wanting to talk about money formally for a very long time. This is your chance. And so I sat down. It was the hardest speech that I ever wrote, and it became the core of everything I teach. It broke down how my entire relationship changed, and it's a funny title. It's called From Princess to Pauper: How the Financial Crisis Saved My Marriage. And it goes down through those key areas: giving, right? The Meiser concept that I explained, values, how we're supposed to be focused on our Jewish values, and bitachon, exclusive trust in God. Now, these are not things that I have to brainstorm with a rabbi. Of course, if I'm talking halacha, I have to ask.
Right.
But the concept that this is fundamental to the way that a Jew relates to money is something that I've learned through years of reading the books and reading, the Jewish books, and understanding, whoa, this is what's missing, right? And reading all the personal finance books and saying, oh my gosh, this is what they're missing.
Okay, very good. So I want to ask, like, where do you want to take this? What's the next project? Are you happy where you are right now with this and just want to get it out to more people, or is there there's a next step for you? Where's it going?
There's always a next step. First of all, I'm always happy where I am, but I'm also a very ambitious person, right? And that's that tension. So yes, there are many ambitions. I think the next thing that people have asked me already for years, and it's long overdue, is a book. And to go back to, what you were asking me, that's when really, obviously, there are going to be rabbis really involved, because, that's, it really has to be, to make sure that, again, I'm not saying that what I teach in the course doesn't have to, but what I'm saying is there, it's not so complicated. It's not, when it's complicated, of course, and my students know, I just called my Rav last night and he told me this, but I still want you to check with your Rav. But I gave him all the details you gave me. You know what I mean? But back to your question, I think there is a book in the works. Again, the people keep asking me, they keep saying, what should we read? What should we read? What is a Torah Jewish book out there, and unfortunately there's very few out there and very few that I would recommend. There is space for a book, there definitely is that. So I think that's my big ambitious project. And I think, again, there is a need for God Wants You to Be Rich to be not just a live program that I can run once or twice a year at most, but really something that women can have more access to, because I know how much it can change their relationship with money, but more importantly, how it impacts their relationship with their spouse and what it's done for marriages. And very, very funny, I often have husbands who at the beginning are very skeptical, like, are you signing up for what? And then they write to me and they say, this is the best thing my wife ever did. Or they say, I watched the videos with my wife and I read the notes. And it's just, that's the truth. It does change a dynamic between husband and wife. And that's what we're here to do.
Wow. So would you call the book, are you thinking of calling the book God Wants You to Be Rich? I think that would sell.
Probably.
in my opinion.
Apparently it's a good name.
I'm not an expert. Let me ask you, a book the audience would be for Jewish people, or would be a universal, something that people could apply no matter who they are?
So you're asking the question that needs to be defined finally.
Right.
There's a part of me that wants, I don't have the answer yet. There's a book, I've been writing, and you write differently for two different audiences. Is there a way to bridge both? There is. Is it harder? Possibly. Am I up for the challenge? Definitely. I obviously would like there to be a book that is universal in the sense that people could read it, even if they weren't Jewish, and they would say, wow, this is the wisdom that Judaism has. This is the depth that goes into practical life. Again, I go back to the profound and the practical. And that would be like my ultimate goal. Now, does that have to happen? Like my husband often tells me, does that have to happen in the first book that Yael writes, or in the second or third? Sometimes you have to ease the pressure, because that's a very high standard, but that is my ambition. Is it going to be the first book? I don't know, but it's what I hope to accomplish at some point.
A lot of our listeners, the core audience that this podcast is made for is the podcast fellowship students. A lot of them are not married. A lot of them are women. A lot of them are men. So the question I have for you is, pre-marriage, what kind of habits of money, what kind of insights that you've learned from the Torah would you give to somebody learning about their Judaism? It doesn't have to be just about money, but it could, any wisdom you could share that's relevant.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I think you should be marriage minded. So that's number one. But pre-marriage, and sticking to my field now, to money. Absolutely. I think, anything that you can do now to really work on your relationship with money, that should be more positive. And again, I will always say Judaism does that for you. Applied in the right way, it will do that for you. It will change the way you relate to this material, physical world. And it's epitomized by money. That's the bottom line, right? Anything you can do now is going to bear fruit later on in your marriage. You're going to be in a healthier place to be a partner to somebody. With that, practically speaking, I mean, make sure that you're taking Meiser. Make sure that you know to do that, and make sure that you're also saving and investing, and you're actually kind of like looking at your money habits and saying, 1 minute, am I taking this seriously? Because if it's a resource that God is sending me to use in the natural world, yes, I have to do my fiduciary obligation to my Creator and give my 10% minimum up to 20%, right? But I also have to use the natural world and do what I need to do. I can't just, Jews are supposed to be careful with money. I can't just run debt and go crazy. No. There's a natural system where you save and you invest, right? And I teach my students how to do that. And that's what's so mind blowing to them. It's like, whoa, yes, this is part of being Jewish. I don't want you to rely on it. That's the difference. You have to do it, but you can't rely on it. So then that's my second point. So yes, we have to give Meiser, and I want you also to do all the other different allocations and make sure that you're, really thinking, being mindful about your money. And with that, the second thing is, I think, again, developing, and this is a work, it's every single day, Rabbi, developing that exclusive reliance on your Creator is something that you have to be working on today, because when you get into a relationship, yes, your spouse needs to know that you trust them. But what is best for a marriage is for your spouse to know that above anything else, you trust in the creator that put you together. Because when that is very, very clear, when your spouse knows, wow, yeah, she trusted me, but she is complete. She really gets that God puts us together, that everything that God is sending us, from the blessing of finding each other, from every opportunity and every challenge, is from him, and that she relies on him to help us through. That gives a tremendous amount of peace and calm to your partner. And that's how you can thrive together. So don't waste time till you're in a pickle. And, life brings challenges. And when you're married, you're two people. There's going to always be a roller coaster, right? Don't wait till that time to develop a healthy relationship with your creator. And there's no healthy relationship that isn't based on trust. And this world is out there to contradict the concept of trust, because we live in a world of concealment of nature, and everything around you is going to tell you that God is not dependable, but that the stock market is, and the US economy, and the IDF, and the this one, and the that one, and the that one. Not to say those things aren't important. They are, but they are creations. The creator is the only one who's sending you everything. And the more time you can strengthen as a single individual, that relationship, which at its premise demands trust, even the word bitachon in it, which is the Hebrew word for trust, in it, the root of the word is something called tach, is a word called tach, which in Torah language is a plaster, is a cementing. Because it's a cementing of the one who trusts and the one who's being trusted. It's the essence of a relationship. So if you can do that now, you're set. You're doing the best gift you can give yourself before marriage. And of course, getting very clear on what your values are, really, because in a marriage, you're going to have to live to advance those values. You want to share your life with somebody who shares your same core values, and they have to be informed by the Torah. Don't fool yourself, so if you can do that exploration early on, it's going to help you choose a partner, and it's going to help you grow in your relationship to the point that when you have to allocate your money, you're going to make sure that money, and as well as your time, both are actually advancing those values. And I think that's a pretty good way to live.
Wow. That's a great ending. I think any question or answer after that would pale in comparison. I'm so grateful to you, Yael, for sharing your life, your story with us, and your wisdom, and it's very inspiring, and I think our students are going to love it.
My absolute pleasure. And anybody who's listening, please feel free to reach out. You can always email me, yael@yaeltrusch.com. You can tune into the podcast, Jewish Money Matters, every week, and hit that follow button, and you'll be updated of different episodes when they air during the week. So, I look forward to, and if anybody wants, Rabbi, I don't know if the audience is interested in, applying a lot of these concepts to, business and career fulfillment. I have a nice free, sort of it's a guide that's a free guide that comes through email. Like, it's not like a PDF, but it's more like every day I'll give you one Jewish strategy to really be fulfilled in your career and your financial life. And they can find that at yaeltrusch.com/strategies. And so that's 5 Jewish strategies for financial and business fulfillment.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Great resource. Okay. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate it.
You've just listened to another great episode of Our Tribe, the podcast, brought to you by the Podcast Fellowship and hosted by Rabbi Tovia Kopstein. Tune in each week every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time to hear more great episodes of Our Tribe, the podcast. If you have any suggestions or questions, email us at ourtribe@podcastfellowship.org. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to help the tribe thrive.